families have a lot more influence than they think. That doesn't mean I'm saying it's the family's fault, because I don't think that at all. Families have more power than they think to make things move in certain directions.
What up, everyone? K Ruggs, the Sober Dog here. I got an awesome guest today. Get some awesome, knowledgeable information about addiction, recovery, and a lot of the stuff that people don't want to dig into, but we need to dig into. And this is Amber Hollingsworth. Amber, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, hello. I'm Amber Hollingsworth. I'm a master addiction counselor, and I have a YouTube channel called Put the Shovel Down, where we focus on helping people understand the science and psychology of addiction. And we spend a lot of time particularly helping family members understand what to do if they have an addicted loved one, what's helpful, what's not helpful, all that sort of stuff.
Awesome. That is exactly, one of the reasons that I connected with your video so quick and wanted to talk to you with all the family members and everything, because it's something like my parents went through, and it's just, what would you say to just the first time you see a parent who comes in and they're just like, we don't know where to start. What do we do? They're just lost. How do you kind of bring them to reality, I guess?
Well, I think it really just depends on where the parents are at or the family is at, because I think just like the person themselves, they go through these stages of change. The same thing with families. There's a lot of different stages, and sometimes families come to us and they're in complete denial. So we try to start with them where they're at. And then other times families come to us and they've been around, the whole treatment addiction world 15 times, and they're just exhausted. And then we take a slightly different stance with them. Mm-hmm.
That's a very good point. If they've been through different things, you got to almost like break down or rewire something they may have learned that could be harmful or could, so to speak, with that. And so like with that would kind of go into enabling a little bit. Mm-hmm. I've seen this a lot. I've dealt with it personally with my family, because my father's side of the families is more old school. They're immigrants from another country, and it's more like, what are you talking about? Detach with love? Like, that doesn't exist. We do anything possible for our son, our grandson. Mm-hmm. And my mom's side was a little bit more realistic of, this is destroying our lives too. Mm-hmm. How would you maybe address that and say to those people, like, the whole concept of detaching and stuff?
Right. I think I'm probably somewhere, our philosophies are somewhere in the middle of those two. Okay. I know if you look at it from a strictly Al-Anon approach, which I'm not opposed to Al-Anon, I like Al-Anon, but so many times families come to us and they're in crisis and they want more than just back up and see what happens. They want some action steps, and I don't blame them. Their whole family's falling apart. If this is their kid, they're not ready to just step back and watch their kid kill themselves, so they want some action steps. I don't think, I tell families similar that you can't necessarily control it, but you can influence it. And so, right. So I'm kind of in the middle. I don't think that you're completely powerless. I don't think that you have all the strings either. So what we do is we teach families and people how to take the power where they do have the power, control where they do have the control, and understand that it's not 100%, but you can definitely, there are things families that do that push people in the right direction, and there are things families do that push people in the opposite direction. So, yeah.
That would say that again. That was, you're not powerless, but you can influence.
That's right. I think you can definitely influence the direction that your loved one is currently taking. Mm-hmm.
That's an incredible statement. That'd be very similar to almost like planting seeds.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I was telling a friend of mine the other day, there was things that sorry, my thing fell. There was things people said to me, or when I went to outpatient years ago, I didn't get sober directly after mm-hmm. that, it was years later, but there was plenty of seeds and good behaviors that were kind of planted that I could mm-hmm. think about. And I like to tell people that when it comes to rehab, something I hear a lot is like, that rehab sucked. They didn't stay sober after. And I'm like, of course there's some that aren't the best, but I know a gentleman who went to the exact same rehab 13 times and got sober the last one. That's, and he'll be the first to say, he's like, it has a lot to, it was 100% my mindset. And when I was ready for a change.
I agree completely. Right. It's really, some of it's about timing, and some of it's just about that it doesn't happen all at once, that people move through these different stages, and sometimes it takes several times. To get somebody from thinking maybe I don't have a problem at all, maybe the first time they go through it's like, okay, I have a problem, but it's not that bad, and then it's like, okay, I have a problem with this, but I don't have a problem with that. They have to move through these different increments to get there, and it doesn't mean it's not working. And I think when you can look at it that way, you'll be so much less frustrated because you can see where movement is being made.
Okay, yeah, that's a great point. And that makes a lot of sense too. As you're saying all this, I'm like going back in my head of times, even like appointments I had sitting in front of an addiction counselor alone, and then with both my parents, different nights and events they had, and where my mentality was at, kind of going through the process. And that's the different movements and the influence in a certain direction or good behavior in a certain direction. Very, very important. Do you sit with like parents and the child a lot too, or the person, I guess, doesn't have to be parents?
What we do in our office, we do a slightly different model. We do from a family perspective. We call it lawyering. What we do is we give the person their own counselor, the person with the problem, which is usually me. I always say I'm always the defense attorney. I'm pretty good at that. I'm always my job is to get people out of trouble. They've dug themselves in a hole. That's what I do.
That's a great
And the family gets their own counselor, but the families that see us, they come just as much or more than the person. So it's not like some programs where it's like, well, the person comes 3 times a week and the family comes, for like a weekend once a month, or one family group. Like the family's in there as much as the person. And if the person's at a really early stage of change, the family may be coming more than the person. And they get their own sort of counselor. And then the 2 counselors work together, because we realize that although the family component is needed, we realize that a lot of times in the beginning, people aren't ready to sit in the room together. And all that happens when you put everybody in the room together is either no one's going to say anything because they're afraid they're going to start a fight or hurt someone's feelings, right? Or say some secret they weren't trying to say. Or they say everything and it does just end up in a fight and everyone leaves feeling worse. So we sort of work up to that because we realize that both sides do not trust each other at all on both sides. And you have to work to get to that point to be in the same room together. So it's this family perspective, but we do it, like I said, separate with a lot of like behind the scenes mediation, and the 2 counselors kind of like going to court or something. The 2 lawyers kind of mediate it out in the background. That's what we do.
That's an awesome way to put it. And that's so true. That is exactly how my first couple, outpatients were. They had parents come once in an 8-week program. That's it. And it was, we were a little bit more advanced as far as my addiction, so there wasn't as many secrets, but it was very we didn't advance really at all. Just like you said, it was almost, we left with more questions and kind of just confusion.
Right.
One thing I know that the gentleman did try to do, and was he was very big on inpatient at that point in time, and we fought back, me because I'm an addict manipulating my way out of the situation. I don't need inpatient, all this. And then my parents at the time were still at that stage of, is it a phase? Can he grow out of it? Do you see people who maybe grow out of it, or what would you kind of say to a parent if they think it's like a phase or things like that? Because I was maybe 19, so they thought it was like first year college. He's going to grow out of it. It's just extra drinking and some cocaine here and there.
Right. That's a super good question. And we do get that occasionally, like maybe it's just someone who's going through a phase.
Yeah.
But for me, it's pretty easy to tell the difference. And I can tell you what the difference is. is because I don't measure addiction, doesn't matter what the addiction is, by what or how much someone's using.
Okay.
Because it doesn't have anything to do with it, for one, and because
Sure.
they're not going to tell you the truth anyway. So I don't even
Yeah.
ask questions about that unless I'm trying to figure out if someone needs like medical detox. And in that situation, I will, just for safety. But
Yeah.
other than that, I'm listening to the way someone thinks and feels, because people with addictions think and feel certain ways. For example, they almost always have some pretty like unreasonable amount of resentments and self-pity going on,
Yeah.
where it's everyone else's fault and they're just fighting in life about everything. It's not just a kid out there having fun that's gotten too far. It's this other psychological place that they've gotten themselves into. So those are the things that we look for. So it's pretty easy for us to tell, you know, whether you're dealing with this or that, even if someone's not using much, but they have that thinking, we're like, oh, it's coming, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of see the hurricane on the horizon there.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's a great kind of area, you know, to discuss as well, like that self-pity mentality of the actual person in addiction, because it can absolutely seem, you know, and from the outside perspective, people may be like, how are you you see yourself as such a victim, you're doing it to yourself. But from the inside, it's like, we feel that everything's going wrong genuinely, like, I just can't catch a break. In
Mm-hmm.
reality, a lot of my behavior, all of my behaviors at the time are causing me not to catch a break.
Right.
But I don't see it, you know?
Right. It's part of the it's part of what I call like the self-medication process. It's the way that someone justifies continuing to make bad decision after bad decision. And it's that way in life in general, not just with people with substance use problems. Like, we all justify making bad decisions by some kind of like, I deserve it, or it's not fair,
Sure.
I wouldn't have to if this didn't happen. We all do that. It's just that people with substance abuse problems are making so many bad decisions, they need to justify it pretty regular. So it just builds up and on top of itself to the point it can become almost sort of like delusional. You know, the way they're seeing reality versus the way everyone else is seeing reality is like two completely different pictures.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a different approach for somebody that maybe is an opioid user versus cocaine and stuff like that? Or is there a similar model?
There's not really a big difference. The only difference in the different drugs is sometimes there are different things you have to take in consideration when it comes to things like detox,
Sure.
or like the physical signs or symptoms you might look for might be slightly different. But as far as how to get someone better,
Yeah.
you know, after you physically get them off, as far as recovery is pretty much the same across the board. It's not, well, I think people have different paths depending on their personality,
Yeah.
but the drug doesn't have that much to do with it.
Sure.
If that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Something that I've heard a lot, and it's been very true in my sense, is well, it says, the saying, I guess, kind of goes, it's easy to get sober, it's hard to stay sober. I didn't say it was easy to get sober by any means, but in my opinion, it was more difficult on a daily basis to stay sober. There's a lot of little battles
Mm-hmm.
all the time. You know, how do you guys, or how would you kind of instruct like a long-term recovery? What type of things do you promote and things, you know, along those lines?
As far as like different kinds of recovery philosophies, I usually say we're what I call non-denominational recovery. We like it all.
Sure.
We like 12-step, we like smart recovery.
Yeah.
If it helps get you on the right path, we are about it.
Mm-hmm.
So we just try to help connect people to their different paths. The thing that we probably have the strongest belief in is the family component, because I really like what you're saying there, Kyle, which is like the whole, like, in that, you know, there's the detoxing part and then there's the staying sober part.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ups and downs in that. And there's a lot of days where you're like, you know, super on it and willing and ready. And there are days when you're like, screw it, and you don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel like it's so important for the family to get it. In our experience, someone's chances of getting long-term recovery is actually more based off of how much the family gets it than the person, because the person's going to ebb and flow with their willingness, with their insight,
Yeah.
based on the ups and downs of life. But if the family really gets it and they can do what they need to do to help the person hold solid during the tough times, they're so much more likely to get through it. That's what we think.
Really? That is fascinating.
Yeah. I know that's really different. Like other treatment centers will
Yeah.
say the other person needs to call me or tell them to come back when they're ready. We don't say that at all. We say the opposite of all that.
So yeah, like I know a lot of 12-step and stuff, it's based on, or at least part of the principles are, it's up to the person when they're ready, the rock bottom, so to speak, and let them call. They should be putting in the work. So that is fascinating, because like, let's say I had the efforts and I just was having a terrible day and screw it, I want to do this. But if the family can kind of see that and have a lot of tools in their toolbox to maybe call you guys, maybe get me in, let's go to the park, whatever, I don't know, something to clear your head.
Right.
That's a good point.
If the family can hold steady, the person's going to have some ups and downs, especially, for the first year or so at least. And so if the family can just be the steady, and they really know what they're doing, they're not going to make things worse. They're not going to scream, yell, throw a fit, freak out, because those are all things that make it worse. And if the family can just hold, the consistent line, not just like a hard line, I just mean like they can just be steady and not reactive. We think people have a lot more chances. And that's what I mean when I say families have a lot more influence than they think. That doesn't mean I'm saying it's the family's fault, because I don't think that at all.
Yeah.
But I think what happens is families have more power than they think to make things move in certain directions once you're in that spot.
Sure. And that is unbelievably good point too, about them saying steady. I'm just thinking of like, by them being the concrete foundation or the rock, like there's so many times where my drama, whatever, was kicking a million miles an hour. And when it turns into a fight, I'm gone.
Yes, that's it.
But if somebody can stay steady and be level-headed, that might totally change the entire scenario.
Yes, because I know you mentioned earlier how that you wanted to talk about enabling. And
yeah, sure.
Like I said, a lot of our thoughts and philosophies are very different. I get that. And so some people love it, and it takes other people a minute to come around to it. That's okay. But my thing is, the most enabling thing that families do, like the worst thing you can do, is play the bad guy role. Worst thing you can do, because when you do that, it allows the other person, the person struggling with addiction, to feel sorry for themselves, to build a resentment, to get the efforts, and to just sort of say, forget it, and just go out there and do what they wanted to do. And if you refuse to play the bad guy role, you're not giving them what they need emotionally to make the decision. People worry about the money, right? People talk about enabling being like, don't give them the money. But the emotional currency is more important, right? Because they don't just need the money to use, they need to be able to justify the use, especially if they've been sober, like it's a relapse situation. They need the reason. And if you don't give it to them, I'm not saying they won't use, but it's way harder.
Wow.
Just don't play into it.
You just blew my mind with that one. That is unbelievable. Especially with the relapse, the reason to use. Mm-hmm. I mean, I did, most people I know were talking about relapse. It's usually an event that sometimes triggered it in a lot of cases, but just like you said, a fight, a resentment, girlfriend, boyfriend breakup, whatever. Certain people, myself, very much. I was kind of a reward user in the beginning. So my relapses too were more of like, nothing's going wrong, I'm having a good day. And I just got very complacent.
Right.
But when you said about that emotional currency to use, that is fire. That is fascinating, because that's so true. I'm out there with the dealer, and the whole time I'm telling myself in my head, it's because of the fight. How could she say this? How could he do that? If that's not there, I might have a whole different thought process going
You're
out.
feeling guilty if that's not there, right? You're
Yeah.
feeling that voice in the back of your head saying, you know, like you feel bad about it. And that's the only little voice that has any chance at all of like talking you out of it, right?
Yeah.
That's the voice of reason. And so when families engage in all of that reactive behavior, they're just feeding that addiction, because the person with substance abuse problem will pick the fight consciously or unconsciously as the reason to go out and use. I mean, my clients will do it with me. I can feel it coming. Like I go to get them out the lobby. I'm like, oh, here it is. Like you can feel it. And I'm just like, when I feel that happen, there are things that I can do to just sort of preserve the relationship, step back a minute, and I'm just not going to let that work. I'm like, yeah, you can do that, but it's not going to be my fault, you know, kind of thing.
So if you sensed that if I was coming in to talk to you and you sensed that I was the patient looking for an excuse to leave your office and get high, how would you maybe differ in a couple things you'd maybe say or do?
A lot of times it's just that the person wants to draw you into an argument. And I mean this, like when I've worked with someone for a while and I have a good relationship and I have rapport, you know, and then all of a sudden they're coming in different and it feels like nothing I can say is right. And it's like, whoa. Sometimes I'll even say that. I'll say, whoa, dude, like, are you trying to fight with me? What's happening? And I'll be kind of funny. And I'll say, you know what? You're having a rough day. I have rough days too. I'm going to give you a do-over. I'm going to let you come back on Friday. We're going to talk about it again. No worries. You know, if I need to just sort of let them go early so that they don't suck me into the fight, or if I just have to validate the points that they have that are valid, you know, if they're mad about something, I say, I kind of get it. I don't blame you, for being mad about that. Just don't power struggle about it.
That's very true. As far as some of the other parts, like how I was always brought up in recovery and addiction, especially with I am a big fan. I go to 12 steps all the time. But they do have a lot of that, kick them out of the house type behavior for, back to a parent or a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what would you say, if there is a person living with their family who's just kind of creating destruction in the whole house, how do they?
What do they do?
Yeah.
Our philosophy on that is this. We don't want the families to fix any of the messes that the person is making.
Okay.
But at the same time, so that's where we come from, the non-enabling. Like if they, if they're not supposed to go to school and they're sleeping in every day and not going, cool. That's their grade or whatever, like whatever. They're blowing the situation up with a girlfriend, whatever they're doing, they're doing. But at the same time, building a positive relationship with that person. So that's the opposite of what most families want to do. What most families want to do is they want to control all these external factors, but fight with the person or plead with the person or something,
Yeah.
But we reverse that. We say, you're going to let the damage happen out here, but you're going to build a positive rapport with the person. Meanwhile, because when that damage gets big enough, they're going to come to you if you have a positive relationship, and they're going to want your help and they're going to want to know what to do. And when you we call it a window, when you get your window, then you can say, I don't know, have you thought about this? Yeah. And then when you do it that way, even if you're saying go to treatment, the person feels like you just helped them. Whereas if you come in it too fast, that, you just help them get out of a bad situation, versus if you're just down their throat all the time. They trust you. I call it like building credibility with the person.
Yeah, that's a awesome way to do it, because it's not, you need to go to treatment. It's not forcing, or because then the person immediately puts a wall up, like you're telling me what to do, versus things are going wrong. Have you considered this? And then I'm a lot more receptive. And
when the person's open, I might say, do you think it would be easier if you went away? Because then you wouldn't have all this like freaking hanging on to you, Or I might say, would it be easier if you went away? You had to deal with your mama every day. She's tricking you. And they say, I know, like there's just a way to go about that.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to force it. So we're not so much that we say you can't, like I know some people say you have to kick them out. Mm-hmm. Sometimes families do have to kick a person out, but that needs to be based on what the family needs, not based on the idea that I have to kick them out for them to get better, because we don't believe that. We don't think kicking someone out makes their addiction better. In fact, it usually makes it like 1,000 times worse. However, sometimes families need to do that because of what it's doing in the home.
Yeah.
So for us, if you're going to make that decision, it needs to be about the family, not necessarily about what it's going to do to the person. Because this idea of like hitting bottom, we're not, we're not huge on that concept.
Yeah. I that's ingrained in me a little bit because of 12 step, but the more I look at it and see it, I totally understand and am not 100% on the bottom. And another thing we always hear is like, there's a trap door at the bottom of every bottom. So no matter what, if I go out today, I'm going to create more damage than I ever created prior. It's
Right.
getting worse. So there never is a true bottom anyway.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that, the reason our channel's called what it is like, the saying is you hit your bottom when you put your shovel down, right? So it's like,
stop digging.
right. Yeah. Just whenever you decide that's enough, that's enough. That's your bottom right there.
Yeah.
I do think it has to be more uncomfortable than comfortable, right? It does have to be more negatives than positive. So the scale has to tip for sure, right? If I'm talking to someone who's really early on in addiction and maybe they're in college and they're still passing their classes, but they're partying it up crazy, there's nothing I can do with that, right? It's got to get a little tipped.
Yeah.
But this idea of throwing someone out and waiting for them to hit bottom and then they're going to decide to get better, I just don't necessarily believe that, because people live on the streets and still use. People lose their children and still use. People go to jail and still use. People kill themselves and overdose and come right back and still use. There's no, if this bad thing happens, they're going to stop.
Yeah, that's so true. That scenario happened exactly with me. My parents kicked me out on I believe it was a Monday. And just like you said, I mean, I've kind of thought about it, but never put it together 100% the way you just said it, which is very good. They needed to, because, just the night before, I stole a bunch of money out of my mom's purse when she got home from work at 11 p.m. And it's like, that was an over and over thing of affecting their finances, their mental health, everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I went on a tornado the day they kicked me out. The next 6 days were damage, destruction, and felonies. And I did say a while ago that it helped me because I got arrested not even a week later. But, like you were just saying, how we were talking about it, because I got kicked out, I went crazy, which kind of caused me to get arrested. So it's not necessarily that action was like a great benefit. It just happened to be the circumstance. And again, you said it too, in what you just said, I used the whole time in jail and prison, the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So the mindset didn't change at all.
Right. So even the getting kicked out didn't do it. The getting arrested didn't do it, right?
Nope.
What did it?
I got rearrested. So I did my time. I did almost, I did a full 3.5 years. I got out and I got violated on parole, and a combination of being back in, and then I had a phone call with my parents that was just, I had never heard their voice the way it was. It was just pure devastation. And my brother had a wedding coming up. They're like, we're pretty much planning our lives with one son. You're going to be dead the way you keep going,
Mm-hmm.
And if they didn't push anymore, there was no like pleading. It was just, it was so raw. I don't know. Something just kind of clicked at that point. I'm sitting there looking back in jail where I am again. And I just, all these emotions hit me of, what am I doing? I had enough.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just sick of this life. And that was like the start of all,
right.
transformation.
I kind of think it starts when the person, whatever leads to this, but when the person begins to believe that their life can be better.
Yeah.
Right. So whatever makes that happen, if it's like, you know what, like, I'm tired of this and I think it could be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And usually where we're at that point, I mean, anything can be better at that. Like, we're so devastated. And the way I always describe it to people too is, addiction to me at the end was 2 minutes of pleasure and 5 hours and 58 minutes of misery until that next hit. And that was the constant cycle.
Yep.
That's it. You know, there's no, like, I'm out partying, having a blast at all. It is a
It's
complete
not fun. Mm-mm.
yeah. That's, you know, is there any kind of, good other stuff as far as the enabling, that you could touch on, maybe, good practices, bad practices, or anything that, you know, maybe, more to like girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, because there's just so much involved in this. You know, we could go for 3-4 hours, but I know there's a lot of important stuff, and people, you know,
Hmm.
struggling with this with friends and family.
For us, the key is this balance of healthy boundaries. Now, boundaries meaning about yourself, like the family, not about the person. We're not about the home contract. We're not about any of that. We're about, like, what are your boundaries for you, what you will and won't do, combined with getting out of that bad guy role. We found that when people set the situation up like that, their loved one starts taking steps toward getting better
Okay.
way faster, because all you're doing when you're doing that other stuff is you're blocking their view. Like, for example, like if you have, like, maybe it's a high school student and they're using whatever, and the parents like logging into the parent portal and they're like looking at their grades or whatever, and
Yeah.
they're like yelling at the kid, you need to study, and they're staying on them just enough to make this kid pass that class.
Yeah.
But what they're, so that's causing two problems. Number one, the kid passes the class and they think you're just crazy and you're overreacting, and see, they're just fine, right? At the same time, you're destroying any relationship you have with them. So anything you say, they don't listen to it at all. They just think you're an idiot and you don't get it and you're stupid and whatever.
Yeah.
So you're really sort of double negatively impacting it that way. When we would say, be really nice and say, you know what, I hated algebra too. I never want to stay for that stuff. Move on and let them fail the class and keep your relationship, because in the end, the relationship is the thing that you have to leverage. And that's what I can even hear that in the story you tell about your parents.
Yeah.
It's like they were just like not mad at you, but they're just like, we just can't, we can't do this anymore. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it was kind of, you know, they had the "we can't do this" for a while. It was almost just a pure, I don't know. I'd never heard that tone on either of them. Of You know, it was like they were knew that, you know, I was gonna have a funeral the next day. It was like they're saying their goodbyes almost, and it was just brutal.
yeah.
But what I wanted, what you just said about, so let them, you know, you say to them, let them fail the class. I know a ton of parents who would sit there and nod to you, but could not physically let them do that because of the whole, their future. I can't let them fall. And the last 20-30 years of the kind of helicopter parenting, you know, we got pre-K. What do you do to the parent who kind of nods and says, yeah, but they're not going to let them fail. They're going to keep kind of,
I mean, for us, that's why the family has to see us as much or more than the person, right? Because they have triggers and relapses too. We'll take a parent portal password in a minute. We'll say, log in there. Now hand it to me. I'm changing your password. Like, we teach them how to not look at it, how to not put it in front of their face so that they're not triggered, and we help hold them solid. The same way as, like, if you're the person with addiction, you're seeing your counselor helps you, figure those things out. We do the same things for the family. So, like you're saying, you could say it once and then there's just that thing inside of them that can't tolerate it. Plus, I just say, you think failing this class is going to be the worst, but that's going to lead to, then they're going to be failing out of high school. And then you get them through high school and they're going to fail out of college. And then they're going to flunk their marriage. And then they're going to fail their children. So, like, every time you think you're going to save them from this thing, the next thing's bigger. So you might as well let this thing fall, because the next one's bigger than this one.
that, that's a very good point. That's a great way to put it, and maybe let them see the big picture.
Right. Let's, whatever you got right now, let's fail that, because that's not going to be as big as the next thing on the horizon. Because the
Very,
failing part's going to have to come. The
very,
sooner the better, we say.
yeah, you can't avoid it. At some point in time, it's going to happen.
Right.
Amber, where can you tell everyone what, you know, your channel again, your in whatever you guys got online, social media, anything, you know,
Yeah.
fire it all off wherever anyone can find you guys and your stuff.
Our main thing is our YouTube channel. It's called Put the Shovel Down. We do have Facebook, and we have a Facebook family group, but most everything stems around the YouTube channel. And
Okay.
we also have an online course for families called the Invisible Intervention that teaches you kind of the things I'm talking about, but it's like more the exact step-by-step, say this, do this. You know, we're less like counselors and more like coaches. You know,
Yeah.
people want to know what to do, right? They're like, tell me what to do. This is a mess. And we'll say this, do this on this day at this time, you know. So it gives that real in-depth sort of look at exactly how to go about it, especially when you're dealing with someone maybe who's in denial or actively using.
Sure. And
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. It kind of went full circle from the beginning to the end, because you talked about the family seeing as much as the person. And then at the end, we just talked about it. That is awesome and so important, and just I'm just picturing like 5 or 6 people in a circle, and instead of just working on one, you're working on everybody, and it's like so many better ways to attack the problem because everyone's in the mix. That's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Such a good way to put the practice.
Everyone's happier, right? The family's happier, the person's happier, everyone likes it better. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down and talk to me. I'd love to do it again. Maybe we could pick a different area or something to talk about or focus on. I know I jumped a little bit over, but a little bit on different areas. In a couple months or something. That would be awesome. And
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
thank you. Have a great Sunday. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye.
Bye.